I wasn't supposed to be home. That's what kept looping in my mind as I fumbled with the key, my hands still cold from the wind outside. The meeting got canceled, some last-minute reschedule, and I figured I'd just surprise him. Pick up dinner, maybe. Something warm. Something that smelled like effort. The hallway felt eerie when I stepped in, quiet in a way it rarely was. No music playing, no TV humming, no whistling from the kitchen while he pretended to know how to cook. Just stillness. I called out, casual, like nothing was off. "Hey, I'm back early!" No answer. I should have known then. My stomach should have dropped, but I didn't even flinch. I took my shoes off like everything was normal, walked past the coat rack where his jacket still hung, straight toward the bedroom where I heard faint noises, soft, almost muffled. And then I opened the door. They didn't even notice me at first. Not until I spoke, only I didn't say anything. Clever. I just let out this horrible, choked laugh. The kind of sound you make when something's so absurd it stuns you silent first. I stood there, blinking, while she scrambled off him like she'd just touched fire, and he sat up, shirtless, not even looking guilty, just annoyed. "Oh, you're home." Like I was the one who'd interrupted something sacred. Like I was the intruder in my own flat. I couldn't stop staring at the woman. Her earrings were still swinging. Her lipstick was smeared just enough to make my heart fall straight through my ribs. The red matched the exact shade of gloss I'd once bought for myself, but never wore. Said it made me look too intense. I think I said his name. Once, twice. It didn't sound like it belonged to me anymore. And then he laughed. That laugh. I'll never forget it. "You'll never leave me," he said, like it was the punchline to some inside joke. Like this wasn't real. Like I was still the same girl who swallowed her words and let things slide because he didn't mean it. But I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even scream. I picked up my handbag, checked my coat pockets like I was leaving brunch, and walked out. My knees were trembling, but I didn't give him that. I didn't give either of them a final glance. The only sound behind me was her muttering something, probably asking who I was. He didn't answer. Maybe he still thought I'd come back, that I'd text some long message later, half blaming myself, that I'd cry and wait and forgive and pretend none of this happened. But that version of me died in that room. I didn't go to a friend's place, didn't check into a hotel. I went straight to the little storage unit I'd been paying for, in secret for months. At the time, I told myself it was for seasonal clothes or old books I didn't have shelf space for. But deep down, I think I always knew I'd need an exit plan. The air inside was cold and stale. It smelled like cardboard and old receipts. But it was mine, all mine. I sat on a plastic crate and just breathed. That brittle kind of breathing where it feels like your lungs are paper and any sharp thought might shred them. I replayed it, over and over. The lipstick, the laugh. "You'll never leave me." Like I was furniture. Like I was an account he forgot to log out of. Like I was his property. But I wasn't crying. Not yet. I wasn't even angry. Just numb. My hands were still cold. I stared at my fingers for a while, trying to decide if they looked different now. Like betrayal had, soaked into the skin and marked me, branded me stupid. I pulled out my laptop and started going through the files. Not photos, not memories. Those would come later. This was paperwork, contracts, bank statements, password logs, all the little things I'd kept scanned and saved. Because I handled the admin side of us. He was always too forgetful, too busy, too tired to understand interest rates or auto renewals. So I did it. And it hit me all at once. My name was everywhere. On the electric bill, the lease, the car insurance, the joint account he'd barely contributed to, but used like it was his personal ATM. And worse, there were things I didn't recognize. A loan application, a subscription to something that sounded like crypto training. Charges from months ago I hadn't noticed. They were all under my name. I felt sick. Not the queasy, hungover kind. The kind that comes from realizing your life is a house built on sand and the tides rolling in. I opened a spreadsheet, started documenting everything. It felt cold and clinical, but necessary. If I couldn't feel anything, I could at least do something. I made a list of every account, every transaction, every lie I'd ignored because love had made me soft and stupid. But not anymore. I was awake now, and I wasn't going to scream or beg or fight for scraps of decency. I wasn't going to walk into heartbreak empty-handed. He thought I'd break up with him, cry in the bathroom, maybe drunk dial him 2 weeks later. He didn't know he'd just handed the wrong woman the final straw. And I was done playing small. The morning after, I found out I didn't sleep in, I didn't call in sick. I put on real clothes, brushed my hair, and went to work like I hadn't just watched my relationship rot in real time. There's something strangely powerful about pretending everything's fine when it isn't, like armor or theater. My coworkers smiled. "You look nice today," someone said. I smiled back. "Thanks," I said, as if I hadn't cried in the car before walking in. As if I hadn't just realized I'd been legally and financially handcuffed to a man who thought laughing in my face was a flex. I got through the day by going on autopilot, emails, meetings, coffee, repeat. But inside, I was making mental lists, not of things to fix, of things to sever. That night, I went back to the flat. Not to talk, not to scream. I just wanted to see how he acted now that he thought he'd won. He wasn't even surprised to see me. "Didn't think you'd be gone. Long," he said, like I'd taken a walk to cool off, like I was some moody pet returning to its owner. I looked around the living room, my candle still burning low, my throw on the sofa, my name on every piece of post stacked on the entryway table. The flat looked the same, but something had died inside it. Not just love, not just trust. Me. I had quietly stepped out of my old self. He tried to kiss me. I stepped back. He grinned. "You're not actually mad, are you?" I didn't answer. I walked past him, into the bedroom, and started pulling a few things together. Clothes, chargers, jewelry he'd given me with money from my card. I wasn't packing to leave. Not yet. Just reclaiming what was already mine. He watched me with amusement, like I was putting on a show. "Babe, come on. You're being dramatic. We weren't exclusive, you know that." I laughed. I didn't mean to, but it slipped out. Sharp, quiet, not out of humor, but disbelief. We'd lived together, split bills, shared a bed. I knew his mother's birthday. He'd borrowed my toothbrush. But sure, let's pretend there were footnotes to our relationship I'd somehow missed. That night, I went back to the storage unit. I sat cross-legged on the floor and stared at my laptop screen until my eyes blurred. I kept going, file after file, screenshot after screenshot. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't even shocked. I felt something colder, cleaner. This wasn't a heartbreak. It was a paper trail, and he was about to get served. The thing about being underestimated is it makes people sloppy. They don't watch what they say. They don't cover their tracks. They forget you're paying attention. And I always have been. I had emails, texts, photos, documents he signed with my name, debts that mysteriously appeared, in my credit report just months after we moved in together. Installments paid late, if at all, and they always traced back to him. I let it slide at first, back when I still thought love meant trust, and trust meant forgiveness. But forgiveness is expensive when you're the one footing the bill. I organized everything into folders. Proof A, timeline, shared accounts. It felt clinical, efficient. I kept reminding myself, this isn't revenge, it's accountability. It's justice in heels and a high ponytail. I'd never sued anyone before, but I've read contracts for fun and memorized my national insurance number by heart. There was a time he called that overthinking. Now, it's strategy. The legal advice clinic was quiet when I walked in. One woman at the desk, typing with her nails clicking. She looked up and smiled. "How can we help?" I laid out the printouts, one after another. I didn't shake. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I was ready. It wasn't about heartbreak anymore. It was about how many years he'd spent building a lie, and how cleanly I could cut through it. The woman's brows rose slowly as she read through the stack. "This is a lot," she said softly. I know. You've kept thorough records. I always do. She nodded, flipping a page. And you're sure you want to proceed legally? I didn't hesitate. He used my name to take out loans. He bought himself a PlayStation and an espresso machine while I was working. 2 jobs. He laughed in my face and said I'd never leave. So yeah, I'm sure. She smiled, just a flicker. Not cruel, not gloating. Just like she understood exactly what kind of woman I'd become. It's going to take time, she warned, and he's going to push back, but we can build a case. I signed the intake form. Let him push. When I left, I felt taller. Not proud, not vindicated, just clear. I knew what I had to do. No more crying into pillows. No more apologizing for his mess. No more half-living so he could feel whole. Back at the flat, he was on the couch, gaming, completely unaware that the countdown had started, that his days of freeloading were numbered, that I wasn't just going to walk. I was going to shut the door behind me and lock it from the other side. He turned as I walked past. Dinner? I paused just long enough to say, I'm not hungry. But I was, just not for food. People talk about revenge like it's loud, like it's shouting or smashing things or showing up uninvited with a face full of fury. But mine was quiet, precise, something between a chess move and a checkmate. I started packing little by little, nothing that would alert him. A book here, a necklace there. The passport I kept buried under our shared socks. Slipped. Quietly into my handbag. I moved money from our joint account to mine, the one he didn't know I'd opened after the first accidental overdraft. He still came home acting like the king of the castle. Still left dishes for me to clean, laundry half done, wrappers tucked into the side of the sofa cushions like I was his mom. I stopped reacting. Didn't roll my eyes. Didn't argue. I just noted things in my head. Mental footnotes, Exhibit B, C, D. I started smiling again, and he thought I was forgiving him, that I was too weak, too dependent, too in love to really leave. It's wild how predictable he was. It's like he'd studied every toxic boyfriend on the internet and took notes. There was one moment, just one, that almost broke me. He handed me a mug of tea. No words, just placed it down beside me while I was working on my laptop, scrolling through articles on civil lawsuits and identity fraud. I looked at it for a long time, steam rising like a ghost. For a second, I wondered if maybe deep down he was sorry, that maybe he felt something like guilt. But then I noticed he'd used my favorite mug, the one I told him not to touch, because it was the last thing my Nan gave me before she passed. And it was chipped. That tiny fracture on the rim said everything. He didn't care. Not about me, not about my things, not about my history. Not even when it was served in porcelain. That night, I boxed up the last of my belongings and stored them in a friend's spare room. Told her not to post anything, not even a hint. I needed everything airtight. The lawyer messaged me 2 days later. Documents are ready to be served. Just need a confirmed address and time. He'd be home on Friday. Always was. Pizza night. His treat, which somehow still came off my debit card. I replied, Friday, 7 p.m., address confirmed. There's a special kind of silence that comes right before something ends. Not dramatic, not eerie, just still. Like the world's holding its breath before it claps. That was me, waiting for Friday. Friday arrived like any other day, which made it all the more unnerving. I woke up early, made coffee, and sat in the corner of my friend's flat staring at my phone like it might explode. I kept checking the time, like somehow I'd miss 7 p.m., as if the weight of this whole thing could slip past me if I blinked. I didn't text him, didn't say a word. I figured he didn't deserve a heads up. He didn't give me one when he emptied out the joint account, or when he used my name to take out that business loan that mysteriously funded a lad's holiday and a secondhand motorbike. He didn't ask if I was okay when I was working, late to cover the bills he swore he'd paid. So no, he didn't get a warning. At 6:50 p.m., my heart was pounding so loud I could feel it in my throat. My solicitor had arranged everything, process server, paperwork, even made sure there'd be a witness if needed. All I had to do was wait. Sup, 3 p.m. My phone buzzed. He's been served, didn't take it well, locked the door, shouted something about not signing a thing. Standard stuff. I sat there staring at the message, the way you stare at a final exam grade you thought you'd failed but didn't. I read it over and over until it stopped feeling real, until my hands stopped shaking. I thought I'd feel victorious. I thought there'd be fireworks or some grand sense of closure, but all I felt was tired. Like I'd just run a marathon through broken glass and only now realized how cut up I was. He tried to call 3 times. I didn't answer. Then the texts came in. What the hell is this? You're being dramatic. Come home so we can talk. You don't really want to do this. And then the one that made me laugh out loud. An actual laugh, like a bark. This isn't how people who love each other handle things. Oh, the irony. This from a man who handled my trust like a pub tab, who thought love meant leverage. That me being too tired to fight back meant I never would. I blocked his number. The solicitor called me a few hours later just to check in. He's rattled, she said, but he'll have to respond formally. You've got everything in place. Thanks, I said, feeling the weight of the day finally drop from my shoulders. Seriously. I hung up and looked around at the borrowed walls and secondhand bedding in my friend's guest room. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and it was peaceful. The storm had landed exactly where it was supposed to, and I was somewhere far, far away from it. It's funny how silence can be louder than a screaming match. After I blocked him, everything just stopped. No more angry texts, no calls from numbers I didn't recognize, just quiet, which honestly was unsettling at first. Like walking through your house in the dark, knowing something's there but not seeing it. But slowly, that silence turned into relief. I started sleeping again. Not fully, not through the night, but enough to make it through a day without caffeine propping up my bones. I still jumped when my phone buzzed, but less often now. My mind was learning to unclench. The solicitor kept me updated. He hadn't filed a response yet. Probably thought ignoring it would make it go away. Or maybe he was scrambling for a new story to spin. One that didn't involve him admitting he took out 3 credit cards in my name while telling me we were saving for the future. You want to know the most twisted part? I still had his passwords saved in my notes. Not because I planned to use them, but because for so long I had to manage everything. Utilities, rent, car insurance. If I didn't, it didn't get done. He lived like money was just this mystical, ever-replenishing thing. I lived like I was patching leaks in a sinking boat with duct tape and willpower. And somewhere along the way, I started thinking that made us a team. One night, maybe a week after the papers were served, I went through the shoebox of receipts I'd kept. Not because I was organized, but because I was paranoid. Turns out, that paranoia was the smartest thing I ever did. Old bank statements, purchase logs, emails I'd printed out in case he lost them. Evidence. Real, damning, undeniable proof. I emailed it all to my solicitor. She wrote back almost instantly. This is gold. He won't have a leg to stand on. I didn't reply right away. I just sat there looking at the line she'd written and realized I finally had something he couldn't twist. Something that made me untouchable for once. Then I did something even bigger. I applied for my own credit card, in my name. Just mine, not for spending, just to prove I could. I got approved the next day. I nearly cried in the middle of the kitchen. That little plastic rectangle symbolized more than credit. It meant I existed on paper again, outside of him. It meant I could build my own damn score, my own life, and never again let someone hijack it for their convenience. I took a photo of it and sent it to no one, just saved it in my phone. My version of a victory banner. He had taken a lot. Years. Money. Sanity. But the thing he never got, because he never really understood it, was my resilience. And now, it was starting to show. The weeks after that felt like a strange kind of purgatory. Not because I was unsure of my choices. Quite the opposite, actually. It was more like the world had taken a step back, waiting for me to make the next move. Everything in my life seemed to be in slow motion, like the earth was holding its breath. But I didn't mind the quiet. For the first time in a long time, I could hear myself think. No more gaslighting, no more wondering if I was just overreacting. Every morning, I woke up in my own bed to my own thoughts, the way it should have always been. I focused on myself, on the things I used to love before I got tangled up in his mess. Yoga in the mornings, painting when I felt like it, reading without guilt or distraction. And though it wasn't easy, I found pieces of myself I thought I'd lost for good. One evening, as I was sitting on my balcony, I saw a few of my neighbors gathered by the dumpster. They were talking in low voices, laughing. It was such an odd sight, something that would have felt normal in another life, in a time when I still understood what it was like to have light-hearted moments. They looked so carefree, so free. And it reminded me of the feeling I had when I first moved into this apartment, how wide-eyed and optimistic I'd been. I had dreams, real ones, not the borrowed kind he'd tried to install in me. Dreams I thought I had to sacrifice. I took a breath, inhaling the fresh air, and something clicked. I was already free. But the calm before the storm is always temporary. I knew deep down there was still a reckoning on the horizon. I wasn't entirely naive about how things worked. His pride wouldn't let him walk away without a fight, and that's when I started preparing. Not for the lawsuit, no, I had already taken care of that, but for the fallout, for the final confrontation. The moment when he'd have no choice but to face me and the mess he'd made. I didn't have a plan yet, not a concrete one, but I was ready. The thought of him sitting there, waiting for me to be the same naive woman he could walk all over, made me want to laugh. If he thought he'd win, he was wrong. And when he showed up again, because I knew he would, he'd see exactly how wrong he was. It didn't take long for him to make his first move. I'd known it was coming. You don't drop a bomb like that and just walk away. So when my phone rang at 2 a.m., I wasn't surprised. I didn't even need to look at the screen to know who it was, but I did anyway. His name flashed on the screen in big letters, like a reminder of everything I had let myself become. I didn't answer. Not this time. Not when I had finally found peace without him. He left a voicemail, his voice dripping with the same arrogance that used to make my skin crawl. "I told you," he said, his tone sickly sweet. "You'll never leave me. I always get what I want." I could hear the smug smile in his voice, even through the phone. The entitlement, the belief that I owed him something, it was infuriating, but also oddly satisfying. He couldn't even begin to understand how much he'd already lost. I hit delete without listening to the rest. I didn't need to hear more empty threats or his pathetic attempts at manipulation. I had a plan now, one that didn't involve him. The world I had been trying to build, one without his shadow, was becoming clearer by the day. And even though his call made me clench my fists, I refused to let him have that power over me anymore. I knew he wasn't just going to let go. That wasn't in his nature. But the thing he didn't understand was that I wasn't going to keep playing his game, not this time. The next day, when the papers arrived, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was like a weight I didn't know I was carrying had finally been lifted. But there was no time for celebration, no time to soak in the satisfaction. I'd given him the warning. He hadn't listened. And now, there were consequences. I didn't expect to feel nervous when the court papers were officially served. I thought I'd feel powerful, vindicated. But instead, my hands trembled a little when the process server called to confirm it was done. He didn't say much, the server told me, just kind of stared at me. That sounded right. Silence was his go-to when things didn't go his way. He'd go quiet, then brood, then explode. I imagined him in his kitchen, holding the envelope like it might bite. Maybe for once, he was really thinking about what he'd done. Or maybe not. I knew better than to hope he'd own up to it. He never had. This was the man who once told me, with a straight face, that his ex was crazy for asking him to pay her back for the rent he never covered. Still, that night I kept the lights low, half expecting him to show up. Not because he had any real power over me anymore, but because men like him don't let go quietly. They throw tantrums in the dark. I didn't sleep much. But by morning, the balance had shifted. I walked into work with a straight back and a clearer mind. I even smiled at the receptionist, something I hadn't done in months. She smiled back like she noticed the difference, but didn't want to say anything. Maybe she'd always seen the bruises he left weren't on my skin, but on my spirit. Spent lunch emailing my lawyer and forwarding screenshots. All the bank statements, the credit card bills, my name showing up where his expenses lived. New trainers, video games, streaming subscriptions I never used. Debts in my name while he played king of the world. Every transfer was a reminder of how far I let him go, how far I let myself go. But now, each screenshot was part of something bigger. Evidence. Truth. A record of every lie. I had nothing to hide anymore. Later that night, I got another call, this time from a number I didn't recognize. I answered it without thinking. "I hope you know what you're doing," his voice came through low, almost calm. "I do," I said simply. "You'll regret this." "No," I replied, "but you might." Click. For once, I was the one to hang up first. I used to lie for him. Little things at first. White lies you tell without realizing you're slipping. He's just tired. He's working late. It's not what it looks like. But over time, they stacked up like moldy dishes in a sink no one wants to clean. I covered for his unpaid loans, dodged calls from banks, smoothed over arguments he started and never finished. I'd smile at dinner parties when someone made a joke about couples and finances, laugh along when his mates teased me about being the responsible one. I became fluent in excuses, in deflection, in self-erasure. I told myself I was just being loyal, supportive. That's what good partners do, right? But lately, I'd been keeping count of all the things I hadn't said, things I'd buried just to keep the peace. And now that silence was over, I found myself thinking about everything. I could say if someone actually asked, what happened? I could tell them how he used my credit to buy Christmas gifts for his family, then told them he paid. Or how he guilted me into putting my name on the lease when his record meant he'd be denied. How he'd say things like, "We're a team," right before disappearing for days, leaving me to deal with the landlord, the power bill, the broken boiler. And how once, when I dared to ask where the money went, he turned it around so well I ended up apologizing. I could tell them all of that. But instead, I said nothing. Because I'd finally realized he didn't deserve my explanations. He didn't deserve a detailed list of how he failed me. That wasn't what this lawsuit was for. This wasn't about proving anything to him. It was about finally standing up for the version of myself I used to ignore. The girl who read every fine print on the loan paperwork but still signed it. Chama certis en front de Yubakamant, one who used to check his credit score more than her own. The one who kept thinking love would balance the books. I owed her this. So when my lawyer called to say the court date was officially set, I said thank you and meant it. A strange relief settled over me, like a weight I didn't know I was carrying had just rolled off my back. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was closure. Slow, steady, lawful closure. And even if it took months, I'd wait. Because justice might not come quickly, but when it does, it lands hard and clean. The first thing he did when he got the papers was text me. Not call, text. 4 words. What the actual hell? Not, how could you? Not, can we talk? Not even a lazy sorry. Just rage, entitlement, and the assumption that I'd explain myself. Like I owed him that. Like he was the victim in this story. I didn't reply. 2 hours later, he messaged again. Longer this time, a rant typed out like he was pacing while hitting the keys. Are you insane? You're dragging this through court? It was your idea to help. You said you didn't mind. Don't act like I forced you. It was always like that with him. Nothing ever stuck to him. He slipped out of responsibility like a magician. Everything was either a misunderstanding or someone else's fault. If you held up a mirror, he'd just argue with his own reflection. The day after, I heard from a mutual friend. Apparently, he was telling people I'd lost it. That I was bitter because he'd moved on. That I was trying to ruin his life out of jealousy. I almost laughed. Jealous? Of what? His new girlfriend, who'll probably end up co-signing. His next disaster? It was oddly comforting to hear he hadn't changed. Same script, new audience. But this time, I wasn't playing the part. Let him talk. Let him paint me however he needed to in his head. Let him clutch at whatever version of the truth helped him sleep. Because none of that would matter when the receipts landed in court. Bank statements, emails, copies of applications with my name and his handwriting. Voicemails where he begged me to just help this once. It was all in the folder. Facts, not feelings. Still, a small part of me had braced for this reaction. The denial, the rewriting of history, the petty attempts to win a narrative he never cared about before. What I hadn't expected was how calm I felt in the middle of it. Yerka used to get knots in my stomach when his name flashed on my screen. I'd feel my hands tighten around my phone, my heart doing that weird stutter. But now, I looked at his texts like I was reading someone else's drama. Detached, clear. I didn't feel scared. I didn't feel small. I felt done. He could scream into the void all he wanted. I had nothing left to say. The papers were served. The court date was set. The silence, that was just me finally choosing peace. It's funny how people only talk about grief when someone dies. No one tells you that you can grieve the living too. Their potential, your plans, the version of them you built in your head just to survive. No one warns you about mourning someone who still exists, just not in the way you hoped they would. After the legal papers went out and the dust of adrenaline settled, that's what I was left with. Not fear, not guilt, but a weird kind of grief. I'd been holding it in for so long, I didn't even recognize it. It hit me on a Tuesday, middle of the week, middle of the day, middle of folding laundry. I found one of his old t-shirts at the bottom of the basket, one he never bothered to take. I stared at it like it was some relic from another life. And then I sat down on the floor and cried. Not the delicate film score kind of crying, the ugly, gut-punched kind. The kind where your whole body folds in on itself like it's trying to hide from your own heart. I didn't miss him. I missed who I thought he was, who he could have been if he ever chose me the way I kept choosing him. If he'd grown up. If he'd loved me with anything other than convenience. But mostly, I missed myself. The version of me who was soft, who believed people would change just because you stayed long enough, who thought that loyalty meant staying even when it hurt. I missed that girl, but I didn't want to be her again. She was tired. She was worn thin by someone who only ever saw her as useful. I buried her quietly that day. Not out of shame, but with respect. She tried. She gave everything. But she's gone now. And in her place, there's someone new. Someone who's learning not to apologize for boundaries. Someone who understands that love isn't sacrifice. It's safety. It's being able to breathe without second-guessing your worth. People kept asking why I didn't just walk away sooner, as if leaving was just a matter of standing up and exiting the stage. They never saw the years spent being convinced the stage was my whole world. That stepping off meant free-falling into nothing. But now I see, I didn't fall. I flew. And grief? It's not always the end. Sometimes it's the price of resurrection. It's been 10 days since the papers were served. 10 days of silence. No texts, no calls, no long-winded voicemails slurring apologies at 2 a.m., nothing. I don't know if that makes it easier or worse. Part of me expected noise, a tantrum, a guilt trip, a parade of excuses, probably delivered with that smirk of his like he'd already figured out how to make it all go away. But instead, nothing. He vanished. And the quiet is deafening. I used to crave silence. I thought if we just had one night without an argument, without some emotionally constipated standoff, I'd feel better. I thought silence meant peace. But this is something else. This silence feels like unfinished business, like a record that stopped playing mid-song. And I don't even want to press play again. I just want to know if it was ever music to begin with. My lawyer says that's a good sign. He's probably talking to his own legal team now, she said on the phone this morning. Which means he's taking it seriously? Good. He should. It's not just my name he dragged into debt. It's my credit score, my reputation, my hours spent on hold with banks explaining why bills I never signed up for are in my name. But still, somewhere, deep down in that ridiculous part of my brain that hasn't been fully deprogrammed, I wonder what he's thinking. Is he angry? Embarrassed? Regretful? Does he understand the weight of what he did? Probably not. More likely, he's sitting in someone else's apartment, telling them how crazy I am, twisting the truth like he always does, leaving out the lies, the manipulation, the fact that I was still covering his bills when he was telling me I was too intense for asking if he had a job interview lined up. But here's the difference. Now, I don't need to know. I don't need his side of the story. I lived it. Every drained bank account, every empty promise, every time he said, "You're overreacting," like gaslighting me was a full-time job. And now, in the silence, I'm starting to hear myself again. My real voice. The one that doesn't apologize for setting limits. The one that says no without offering a smile to soften it. The one that isn't asking for anyone's permission to move forward. The quiet used to scare me because it meant he was distant. Now I see it for what it is. Space. Space to breathe, to stretch out the parts of me I shrank just to keep him comfortable. It's funny. Sometimes you need silence to finally hear yourself think. And now that I have, I'm not giving that sound up for anything. I went to Mum's. Today. She opened the door in her slippers and that cardigan she's had since I was 12. "You look different," she said, and I didn't know if she meant tired, older, or finally free. Maybe all three. We sat in the kitchen. She poured. Tea, like always. Milk first like a crime against nature, and I didn't even correct her this time. I just watched the steam curl between us. "I heard," she said softly, and that was it. No questions, no lecture, no, "I told you so," though she would have been well within her rights. Just those 2 words and a look that said she'd been waiting for me to come home. Funny how something that once felt like a cage can feel like a landing pad when everything else falls apart. "I'm fixing it," I said. "Legally, financially, everything." I didn't mean to sound so defiant. It came out like I was justifying, defending, still carrying his shame like it belonged to me. Old habits. Mum reached over and placed her hand on mine. Her fingers were smaller than I remembered, softer. "I never thought you weren't," she said. And just like that, I felt 12 again. Not the kind of 12 that needs rescuing, the kind that still believed her voice mattered. I told her everything, not just about the lawsuit, but about the things you can't write down in court documents. The emotional IOUs, the loneliness that grew between 2 people sharing a bed, the gaslighting that made me question if I was imagining red flags that were basically skywriting. And then I said something I hadn't dared say out loud yet. I think I stayed because I thought I could rewrite history. She looked at me carefully. History? Yeah, I thought if I made it work with him, maybe it would mean Dad was wrong, that I wasn't unlovable, that I didn't mess everything up like he said I would. Mum closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they were full. "You were a child," she whispered. I know, but I still wanted to prove it. I think part of me still does." She squeezed my hand again. "You don't have to prove anything. Not to him, not to your father, not to anyone who made you believe you weren't enough." The kettle hissed behind us, forgotten, and something inside me, some ancient, rusted hinge, creaked open. Maybe I'd never get an apology from the men who failed me, but I could. Stop repeating the lesson they taught me, that I had to earn love by tolerating pain. Mum put more sugar in her tea than was reasonable. I didn't argue. We sat in silence again, but this time it wasn't hollow. It was full of every word we never said, every crack letting in light. I left with a full thermos and a lighter heart. History doesn't get erased, but it can be rewritten, starting now. The morning of the court date, I woke up before my alarm. It wasn't nerves, not really, it was something else. Like that deep breath you take before jumping into a pool. I wasn't afraid of the fall anymore. I was just ready to feel the shock of water, to come up gasping and new. I dressed with intention. Nothing flashy, nothing too timid. Just clean. Lines, soft fabrics, a blazer that felt like armor without looking like it. Power, but quiet. Confidence that didn't need to be shouted. I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't flinch. That was new. The reflection wasn't someone who'd been broken. It was someone who had been forged. There's a difference. I could see it now. The burn marks weren't flaws. They were proof of heat survived, not damage endured. The courtroom smelled like paper and polish and old coffee. He was all ready. There, sitting with his lawyer, spinning a pen between his fingers like it was all a minor inconvenience. Our eyes met, and he smirked. That same stupid smirk he wore the night I walked in on him. Shirt half buttoned, someone else's lipstick. On his neck, my dignity hanging in the silence between us. I remembered every word. "You'll never leave me." It echoed, but it didn't sting anymore. Because here I was. Not just gone. Beyond. I hadn't just left. I'd taken back what was mine. My credit. My name. My story. The judge read the claim aloud. Debts in my name. Credit lines opened with forged signatures. Rent payments siphoned from my account. It sounded like a stranger's life. Like a documentary voiceover. But it was mine. And for once, I didn't shrink beneath the weight of it. His lawyer tried to argue it was miscommunication. That I'd benefited from the arrangement, that I knew and consented. I didn't even need to speak. My lawyer did that for me. Calm, precise, backed by documents, timelines, screenshots, receipts. Receipts of everything, emotional and financial. When the judge asked if I had anything to add, I stood. "I just want my name back," I said, "and my credit, and my peace." The judge nodded. It was enough. It was always enough. I just didn't believe it before. Afterwards, I walked out without looking back. He called out once, my name, like a last-ditch anchor, but I kept going, because I wasn't his to summon anymore. Outside, the air was crisp, the kind that cuts and heals all at once. I took a slow breath and realized something strange. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was clear. And clarity, I'd learned, is far scarier to someone like him than rage ever could be. A week later, the judgment came through. He was officially ordered to repay every cent, plus interest, plus legal fees. It wouldn't fix everything. It wouldn't undo the anxiety I'd carried like second skin for months. But it was a beginning. A line drawn, finally, in my favor. I read the ruling alone at my kitchen table, the sun slipping through the blinds like a soft exhale. My phone buzzed with messages, from my lawyer, from the bank, from my best friend who had been checking in religiously since it all began. I didn't reply right away. I just sat there staring at the page, not stunned, not celebratory, just still. There's a kind of peace that comes after you've burned every bridge behind you and realize you're not stranded. You're free. There's no way back, and you wouldn't go even if there was. He tried to contact me the next day. Of course he did. Emails first. Apologies laced with excuses. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was stressed. You never really supported me." The usual. A remix of old nonsense. Blame served with a side of regret. Then came the texts. Shorter, sharper, like little emotional grenades. "I can't believe you do this to me. You're making me look bad. You were always so dramatic." I blocked the number without reading the rest. It wasn't anger that made me do it. It was boredom, exhaustion. I was tired of reading lines from the same tired script. I wasn't in his play anymore. And then silence. No more smirks. No more manipulation. Just air. It's wild how loud peace sounds when you've been living inside chaos. That weekend, I went to a secondhand shop and bought a small wooden box. Nothing fancy. A little worn at the edges. I lined the inside with scraps of paper, old receipts from the accounts he opened, printed emails he sent under my name, a photo of that ridiculous couch he convinced me to co-sign for. And then I added the court ruling, folded neatly. I labeled the box paid in full. It wasn't revenge, not really. It was a ritual, a closing. I put the box on a high shelf, not to forget it existed, but to remind myself that I'd survived it, that I could put things away now, tidy them into memory and keep going. I used to think closure had to come from the other person, from apologies, from some dramatic reckoning. But closure, I've learned, is just a decision you make for yourself, a quiet no more, a final step forward, and I'd taken it. A month. Passed, then 2. I didn't hear from him again, not directly, just whispers through mutuals. Someone said he moved back in with his mom. Someone else said he's trying to get his life together. I didn't care enough to ask for details. That chapter was finished, not with a question mark, but with a full stop. Life became quieter, but fuller. I started sleeping through the night again. Real deep sleep. The kind where you wake up not because you're startled, but because you've rested. I bought new sheets, burned the old ones, painted the living room, changed the locks, the passwords, the playlist I used to fall asleep to when he wasn't home. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror, brushing my teeth, and realized I looked different. Not dramatically, but enough. The tension was gone from my jaw. My eyes had their spark back. I smiled at myself, toothpaste foam and all. Later that day, I walked past a shop window and caught my reflection. Just a glimpse. But it stopped me. There I was. No longer someone's girlfriend. No longer someone's victim. Just me. And for the first time in ages, that felt like enough. I'd thought about revenge, honestly. I'd imagined slamming the door in his face, or showing up to his work and handing him the court papers myself. But in the end, the quiet undoing was louder than anything I could have said. He laughed when I caught him, said I'd never leave, that I was too weak, too soft, too dependent. But I left. Not just the flat, not just the relationship. I left. The version of myself he had convinced me I was. And that, I think, is the part that'll haunt him most. Not the money, not the court, but the fact that I didn't come back. I left him with everything he thought I needed, and none of what I actually wanted. He still has that old couch, the cracked PS5, the TV he guilt-tripped me into buying for us, all his trophies of manipulation, all his prizes for treating love like ownership. I have my name, my peace, my new place, my future. He can keep the rest. That sticky note I left on the fridge before I moved out. I found it again when I unpacked the last of my boxes. It had somehow made its way into one of my books. I laughed when I saw it. The words still rang true. "You'll never leave me," he said. I had replied without speaking, "Yours, not mine."